Hey, welcome back, guys. Okay, so let's talk about something called chaining. So, like this. So, chaining comes obviously from the word chain, where you can make a chain of things. So, what we mean by chaining is connecting several functions together in order to perform an action, right? So, usually, what we do is when you have a class, for example, you have a class called my class, and you want to perform an action, that is, you want to call a function inside that class, you would do something like this, and then you say my function, like that, right? But we want a way that we can do something like this, but then add one more thing there and say my func2 and another function there, maybe a third one there. Excuse me there. So this is what we call chaining, because we are creating some kind of chain. And even here we can put variables there, and there's some variables, maybe even more than one, and so on. Okay, so this is called chaining. And then what happens is, whatever the last function returns is what will be added to the value here. So if I say value is equal to something like this, then what will happen is only the last operation, the last function here, whatever it returns is what will be contained in this value over there. So just keep that in mind. All of these do not add to this. So what happens here is that we are using, when we do this, so we start with a class like this one, right? And then we call a function there. Now keep in mind that you can only call a function from a class. That's all you can do. So there should be a class here, and then there's a function you are calling. So for us to actually call another function here, it means this must be a class as well, because we can't do this otherwise. So how do we make this a class? We have to make sure that this item returns a class of some kind. One way or another, this has to return a class, so that the result of this will be a class that we can use to run another function on it, like that. So same thing here. This will not run if this does not return a class. So this is very important to remember, that you can only do this from a class. So for you to chain them like this, all these functions in between here must return a class. Only the last one is permitted to return something else, which will be added to this. So this will capture what is returned by the last item. Okay, so if you keep that in mind, then this whole process becomes very easy to understand. So let's take a look at some simple examples we can do this on. Okay, let me clear my throat here for a second. There we go, much better. Okay, so let's create a class here. Now let's imagine something here, a real world example, like let's say you're trying to sign up a user or some kind. Now I'm not going to use a database in this because I don't want to complicate things. So we're just going to use a text file as our database. So we'll be saving to a text file and reading from there. So here I'm going to say class signup, like so. Okay, that's not a function, it's a class. So this is our class here, class signup. Though usually good practice is that the class should have a capital letter like that. That's just good practice. So what I want to do here is create a few functions. So the first function I will create, obviously they have to be public functions here. So I'll say public function sanitize, so it can sanitize the required data that I want to use. Okay, so here I have to pass in the data array, of course. So there we go. So there's a function here that will sanitize my data. Okay, so good to know. And then let's do another one and say public function here and this one is for, so we sanitize our data and then we want to save the data. So I'm going to say save file, something like this. Okay. Now, in order for me to save a file, I need the file name, of course. So we'll have file name there, and I need some data to save, like that. Okay. Then finally, I want us to be able to read this data. So public function, we'll say read file, like so. And of course, we will need our file name there because we need to be able to read from that file name. Oops, like so. Okay, so this is straightforward enough. We have a class and we have a function here that does sanitize data, and then we want to save the file, and then we want to be able to read from the file once in a while. Okay, so now the thing is, in order for us to save or to read from the file, we need to be able to rely on the idea that the file actually exists. Okay, so the file must exist in order for us to save to it or read to it. So I'm going to create another function here that creates the file. So say for public function create file, like so, and then we give it a file name like that, and then do that. Okay, so seems pretty straightforward at this point. So here what I can do now, before I even add some functionality, I can just say my class, something like this, okay, and then sanitize, okay, something like that. Oh, sorry for a second here. I'm going to say my class is equal to new signup. I have to instantiate it, of course, like that, okay. And then I will say my class now, and then do that, and then sanitize the data. So I will put data over there, like that. So of course I need to create data here. So we're just going to imagine that, I think instead of imagining, let's just use what we've got. So I'm just going to put an if statement here, and just say if count, something like, post is greater than 0. Okay, I'll save that. Actually, let me move this down here, like so. Okay, so if we have something that was posted, right? If something was posted, and then let's create a new class and then sanitize that data. Now data is going to be equal to this post right there. So I'm going to put that in there like that. Okay, so easy peasy, right? So let's see, let me go down here and create some HTML text. HTML. Wait, isn't this supposed to make a suggestion of some kind? Let me close the PHP. That's probably why. Okay, there we go. All right, something like that. So what I'm just looking for is a way to create a form so we can submit some data. And of course, I will add an input here of type name. Okay. Oh, sorry. Type text. There we go. The name is name. That would be the username and then the password here. So we're imagining somebody signing up here. So let's add a break tag over there and another break tag over there. Okay. And yes, that's about it. One last input that is of type submit. And then instead of name, let's give it a value of sign up, something like this. And then make sure that the method here is post. And that's about it. So let's go to our browser and load that file in there, right? There we go. So pretty simple. We have that username, we have password, and it does help to add some placeholders So add placeholders, name, and then another placeholder here, password. Okay, that way at least the user knows what to add in there, and then we hit sign up like so. Okay, so pretty easy, right? Now the thing is, let's create some functionality to our sanitize data. So in order to sanitize data, it's very simple. We're going to loop through the data. So data is like that, and then there'll be a key and a value. And all I need to do is just say data key, like so, is equal to value, like this. Okay, so I'm just putting the value back into the same location. However, I want to add some slashes here just so I can, that's what I'm doing to sanitize it. Now you can do all kinds of sanitation filters here. This is not what this is about, so it's just to sanitize this data over there. That's all we want to do. Okay, so sanitize that data, and then once we are done here, we want to let's omit this for a second. We want to save the data. So the data is right here. Wait, save data there. Okay, so in order to save the data, it's very simple. What we have to do is we're just going to say file put contents. That's all. File put contents, and where are we putting them? In the file name there. And then what else here? The data. Okay, now the data, we can't put an array inside a file, so we have to convert it to a string, and we're going to use that. We're going to use JSON to do that. So we're going to convert it to a string and say JSON encode like that, and do that. So what this does here is to convert an array into an actual string so that we can save it. Okay, so once we convert it to a string here, then we can save it to a file like that. Okay, so easy peasy, right? So we're going to write this one later. For now, all we need is just to sanitize the data and save it. So let's try and chain this and see exactly what happens, right? So I'm going to say my class like this, right? Then I will say sanitize the data. Now the data, oh, so I've already done that here. Let me mute that for a second. I'll use it later. So right here, I want to chain this to save file, like so. And then obviously I need to create a file name. So it's just going to be my data.json. I'll save it as a JSON file. And then the data, obviously I want to put post right there like this. Okay, so I want to chain it like that. That at least seems legit. So sanitize your data, save the file. So let's see what happens when we try to do this. So I'm going to put, let me zoom this a whole lot. So I'm gonna put my name there. Then now password, I'll just put a password there, and then hit sign up. Okay, so there we go. Now we have a fatal error. So uncaught error, call to member function save file on no. Now this is the important part here that I wanted you to see. So it's saying we are calling a member function, this function right here, on a no object. Okay, so what this means is that this save file is being called on a no object. Now the reason this is a no is because this function returns nothing. It doesn't return anything, so it returns a no, an empty thing, right? So in order for me, like I said before, you can only do this kind of thing here. You can only do this on a class, the same way we are doing this on another class. So we have to find a way to convert this into a class, and to do that we just need to tell it to return a class. So now this class right here is the one that has the functions that we need to run. So we have to tell it to return this class itself. So in order to do that, we just use the keyword this. So this is the class. So return the class. So once we add return this, then we can do what we want to do here. So if I now refresh and try to send, you see that I do not get any errors anymore. And if you notice here on my folders, I have a new file which has the data in there inside an object like that. So this is an object, name and password. Okay, pretty cool, isn't it? Now, just one thing I want to change is because data here should be added to, because I want to be able to add more than just one user's information, because here, as you can see, the JSON is just containing, it's like one array, right? But I want it to be able to contain more than that. So what I will do here, right here, is I will say array is equal to, that's just a variable there. I'm just going to say array is equal to something like this, and then say data like that. So I'm adding my array to another array. Okay, that way if I JSON decode this, it means I can add more items to this array like so. Hopefully that is understood. This becomes an array inside an array, which means I can add more items to that array. Okay, so let me delete this this file and let me run this again so you can see the difference. Resend. Okay, no errors. If I come back to the file, now you see it's got those brackets like this, which means it can add more items like that there, another item like that, and so on. Okay, so I'll leave it the way it was. Okay, so this is the secret to chaining. The only thing you need to remember is that any of these functions in between that need to be chained should return this, like so, or a class. So once you do return this, then you can chain this item. Now the problem here is that once I sanitize this data, it's lost in the air, because as you can see here, I'm supplying this thing and then supplying it again there. This is kind of a waste. If I have to supply the same item twice, I can just store it in the same class and then use it over and over. So let me remove this one here, bam, so that I don't need to add it again. Once I add it there, I just need to add the file name there. But then the question comes in, where do I get this data from? Because now I don't have this data here. So what I will do instead is I will create a variable here, a private variable, since we're just going to be using it inside here. So I'll say data is equal to, and I will put an array. I'll set it to an empty array like that. Okay. And all I need to do now is, instead of getting this data here, I will put the word this, like so. That way it will get the data from there. Okay. And then we have to set this, because this is an empty array. So here, after I sanitize this data, I'm going to assign it to the top there. So I'm just going to say like this. I'll say this data is equal to data, like that. Okay, so once I sanitize the contents of data here, and then I will change the value of this one from an empty array to whatever the value of data was at the time. That way, when I pull it from the top there, after doing this, because this will be done first, and then I will do this, which means by the time I get this data from there, it's already containing this data that was sanitized. That way, everything works fine. See, it's much leaner now, like so. So let's try and run that again. So this time I'll put another name, Joe, and password there, or just some other text, right? Doesn't really matter. Sign up, and that is done. So if I come back now to my file, you'll see that it's updated. There's a name Joel and there's a password there. Now, if you noticed, it has overwritten the previous name that was there. Now, to avoid that, of course, we're going to here we will read from the existing file, and then so I'm going to say old string or just old data is equal to file get contents, okay, and file name. There we go, file name. And then once I do that, it means I've gotten all the text from the file and put it here. Then, because I use JSON encode to save it, I will use JSON decode. So I'll say old array, which is the data that is already in there, JSON decode this time, and that's old data, like that, or old string. Whatever string we got from there, now we are shoving it into, we're converting it to an array. Once it's an array, then we add to that array here. So instead of this array, we're adding to this one that we've created, adding a new item in there, and then saving it back to a string. Now I'm going to delete this so that we see one more problem here, so that we have no file to start with. And then what I will do now is try to resend that data. And once I do that, I'll get this error that says file get contents, my data failed to open stream, no such file exists. And that's because when we tried to, before we save to the file, we tried to read from it and it doesn't exist. But then it's created here. So this is why we get that. And there's a no there because there was nothing to save. So in order to prevent that, we have to create the file first. So here, I'm just going to create this function here, and I'm going to say, we just check if the file exists, that's all. So I'm going to say if file underscore exists, file name. So if the file exists, we don't want to do anything, right? But so we check if it does not exist. So we say if file not exist, then let's create the file. So how do we create the file? We're just going to say file put contents, right? Because file put contents does create a file if it doesn't exist. And then let's just put some empty data there. We'll put nothing. So that way we create the file. Okay. And then it's very important to return this so that we can use this in the chaining system as discussed. Okay. Excuse me. Right, so now we create the file just to make sure, and then we save to the file. So here what I will do now is to add to this chaining process, I will add create file, right? Now, for me to create the file, I need to have a file name. So I will put the file here, the file name. Now already you can see that I'm repeating this data and repeating there. Repeating is never cool. So what I will do is I'll remove this one because I've already supplied the file name. So the least we can do is create another, wait, what have I done here? So the least we can do is duplicate this one and create file name. That way we have the file name already here, okay? And here I'll set it to an empty string like that. And then once we create the file, we just make sure that this file name, I'm just copying that so I don't need to type everything from scratch. I'll change this to file name. So now that this file name is set to whatever file we have created here, and set it to that. That way the saving file part here doesn't need this file name here. All we can do is just say where we are using file name here, here, and there, we're just going to say this like so. Okay, so problem was solved. All right, so the chain goes like sanitize. Okay, so we sanitize our data, create file, we create the file, and then save. Now we are saving because we don't need any parameters here because we've already supplied the file name and we've supplied our data. So it should work fine. So let me delete that now. that file here, this one, delete file, and then let's do it again. So refresh and send. So undefined variable array on line 35. So let's see that. Line 35. Okay, so it's supposed to be old array. This is the one right here. So copy and paste it there. Okay, so let's try that again. Resend. Okay, so now we are good to go. Everything seems fine. Let's see what we have in our data. And there we go, right? So let me try and add another name here. Mary, and some password there. Sign up. Okay, so it's like we are signing people up on this website. Excuse me. All right, so you see now 1 item, 2 item there. Very, very good. Okay, so these are the basics of chaining. This is how you can chain functions like that. It helps for readability, because once you look at this, you can say, oh, so what's happening is we're sanitizing, and then we're creating a file and saving that file. Okay, so also we want to see some data at the top there. So what I will do is I want to be able to read from there. Okay, so in order to read, I'm just going to say create file. Now, instead of create file, sometimes because we want to use this in multiple instances, which may not make sense to say create file. For example, when reading like this, okay, I want to create something like this, all right? And then I want to set this to result, like so. So result is equal to, okay, so create file and then read from the file. But it doesn't make sense to create a file here because we are reading from an existing file, right? So let's remove this create here and leave it to say file, okay? And then here, let's remove file there and just put it save. It's much clearer now. Sanitize and then the file and then save. Same here, my class, the file is this one. And what do I want to do to the file? I want to read from the file. So I can do this file and do some other things like write file, which is what I've done here. File, write, but I'm using sanitize as well, okay? So we just have to, so now remember that what I said was the very last function, whatever it returns is what will go inside result there, okay? So in order for us to see our results, I want to echo some pre-tags just so it looks nice. It looks human readable. And then I want to print readable the result, okay, like so. And what do I want to read here? Now read file, I don't need the file name here, so I'll remove that because we're already supplying it there. I'll get the file name from the top there. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to say file get contents like that, and then the file name comes from this file name like that. And yeah, actually that's it to read from the file. So I will say return. That is what we're going to return. Return file get contents, that file. And then what else? Yeah, creating the file. That's about it, right? Now remember that when creating the file, if the file already exists, we'll do nothing to the file. So we just return the file name there. Okay, I think this does it. So now let's try and add one more user. So I'm going to say, I think we've used that one before. And let's, there we go. So call to undefined method sign up file. So of course I forgot to change these guys. So file there, even save there. I have to change that one. And create file, that's just file. I think I did the wrong thing here. This one should be read. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so pretty good. Now let's refresh and resend. Okay, so now you can see that we have this here. That's the result that we've returned, but I don't want to return a string, so I want to return an array or an object. So let me just say data, is equal to, and then what I will do is return a JSON decode data, like that. Okay, that's much better. So refresh, resend. Okay, let me zoom out. There we go. So we have this data that we've saved in the file. We have a name, Joe, and a password, Mary, and a password, Peter, and a password. So let's add some other name. Let's just say man, my pass, like that, and save, and you see it added there. Okay, so it's like we are adding users to a table or something. All right, so this is the basic concept of chaining. As you can see here, we are chaining when we are saving, and we are chaining when we are reading from it. So I do hope you have learned something new in this episode. I will see you in the next one, where we do something called type hinting. All right, see you then.